We begin the movie with Frank, a highly trained former British soldier who now works as a professional transporter on the coast of France. His job consists of moving packages without asking questions or altering the conditions of the deal, meticulous, disciplined, and with an unbreakable code of rules. After waiting for the agreed hour, our protagonist heads to a bank, where four armed and masked men appear who have just robbed the bank. They order him to move forward, but Frank tells them that they changed the deal without prior notice. They had agreed that it would be three men with a total weight of 254 kilos. Enraged by this, the leader threatens to shoot him in the head. Remaining calm, Frank alerts them about the possibility of being arrested. He adapted his vehicle to guarantee a successful escape. Even the slightest adjustment could mark the difference between success and failure. Besides, the car has an ignition code. To fulfill the conditions of the agreement, the leader shoots one of his men and throws him out of the vehicle. At that moment, the police appear and the transporter starts his vehicle, beginning the escape plan. Showing great driving skill, Frank goes through several alleys until reaching the highway, where he dodges a barricade by driving against traffic, maneuvers through narrow paths, avoiding several pedestrians with millimetric precision. Finally, he manages to execute his escape successfully, jumps onto a cargo truck, and uses a gun to release the vehicles, creating an improvised barrier that prevents the police from resuming the chase. After dropping the robbers at the agreed point, the leader gives him his share, along with a bonus in exchange for taking them to another destination, to which the transporter points out that he is changing the deal. He returns the surplus and makes it clear that his rules are made to be respected. Once in his humble home, Martin cleans his vehicle and gets rid of the license plates used in the robbery. While preparing a cup of coffee, he notices through the news that the robbers were caught. It turns out that the driver who took them crashed into a taxi driver after making a forbidden turn, which resulted in a serious accident, being caught with the 20 million euros they stole from the bank. Minutes later, he receives an unexpected visit from his partner Tarconi, an inspector who works in the area where Frank operates. Inspecting his vehicle while giving him a short interrogation, he tells him about the bank robbery. Mentioning that his vehicle was the same model the robbers used to escape, finding no evidence related to the robbery, the inspector leaves, not without first saying that he admires him for his meticulous sense of order. At that moment, he receives an anonymous call for a new job. Upon arriving at the agreed place to talk about the deal, the man tells him that he will transport a black bag. The dimensions are 1.50 meters by half a meter. The total weight is 50 kilos. He indicates the delivery location, and just when he was about to share the name of the person who will receive the bag, Martin asks him to be quiet. One of his rules is that none of the names of those involved should be mentioned. He will charge 40,000 euros for the job. If no one is there at delivery, he will leave the package and go from the area. Once the deal is accepted, the terms cannot be modified. On the day of the deal, our protagonist heads to the location, where some men arrive to place the package in his trunk. While traveling the road, one of the front tires ends up punctured, so he decides to stop to replace it. Upon opening the trunk to take out the spare tire, Martin notices that the package is moving. Despite this, he decides to continue without checking the contents. Stopping at a store to eat something, the transporter begins to feel curious about the content of the package. Thinking that it may be a person, he decides to buy a drink, breaking one of his rules when returning to his vehicle. Upon opening the bag, he notices that it is a gagged woman. He gives her some juice to drink and then continues with the job. A few minutes later, Lai begins to complain, forcing him to stop on the road. Frank tells her he will remove the tape, but if she starts screaming, he will have no option but to kill her. When he removes the tape, the girl says she needs to go to the bathroom. So Frank takes her out of the bag, unties her, and puts a rope around her neck to keep her under control. She will have 1 minute starting now. When the time is up, Martin pulls the rope, realizing something is wrong. Approaching, he discovers that the girl tied the rope to a tree. Luckily, he manages to find her within minutes, just a few meters away from the area. But when returning to resume the job, he gets a big surprise when he runs into two officers inspecting his vehicle. With no other option, The transporter uses his ingenuity to neutralize the agents, showing great skill by taking care of them in a matter of seconds. Once at the delivery point carrying the police in the trunk, our protagonist meets with a suited man called Wall, a ruthless criminal who works as a middleman in a human trafficking network, questioning his methods for being late a couple of minutes. The mobster asks him if he saw the content of the package, to which Frank replies by mentioning his third rule, which is to never look at the content of his packages. Wall tells him he likes his way of thinking. Nothing can be done in the world without rules. He gives him the money, and just when he was about to leave, he says that he would like to assign him a new job. To which the transporter replies, pointing out that there is no problem. He shares his rules and asks for the weight and the destination of the package. Upon closing the deal, the transporter leaves with his new job. After making a stop to buy some drinks, Frank is about to resume his job when suddenly his vehicle mysteriously explodes. Suspecting that the package contained a bomb to kill him, our protagonist sets out to return to the mobster's house, surprises his men by breaking down the door, and uses the objects around him to cover himself from the shots. After obtaining a weapon, the ex-soldier neutralizes them in a matter of seconds, interrogates one of the wounded in search of his boss, but he refuses to answer his questions, pointing out that he would rather die than become a snitch. Stealing a vehicle from the parking lot, the transporter notices that Lai is in the back seat, so he decides to stop to leave her in the middle of the road. But just when he was about to leave, his conscience begins to weigh on him, and he decides to go back to help her. He unties her and prepares her a soup before going to bed, not without first telling her that she can do whatever she wants. While Martin rests, Lai sets out to search for information, finding Frank's uniform and war medals. Meanwhile, the trafficker visits his henchmen in the hospital to ask them about what happened, discovering that the transporter survived the bomb planted in the bag, broke into the house, and ended up killing several of his men. Wall asks if the police interrogated him, to which he replies that he just woke up a few minutes ago. In order to avoid the police, the trafficker decides to kill his soldier. The next morning, Martin is puzzled to see that the girl is still with him. She even prepared breakfast as thanks for saving her. At that moment, the inspector appears by surprise, asks about her, and shows him the license plate of his vehicle that was found near a store outside the city. Frank replies that Lai is a cook. He hired her to help him prepare culinary recipes. While shopping at the port, his vehicle was stolen, and he had to call the cook to pick him up. He has not reported it yet because he had a very stressful day. It was the first thing he was going to do at the start of the day, but he just woke up. Tarconi tells him that he would like to inspect the cook's vehicle, so Frank takes him to the garage to show him the vehicle he stole from the Mafia. Luckily, the inspector does not notice the front part. Frank asks him about the rest of his vehicle, to which he says that it was involved in an explosive attack. Apparently, there were 2 police officers in the trunk. The remains are in the lab. They are being separated to start an investigation. In the same way, he will have to present himself at the station to give his statements. He will be waiting for him in his office. A few minutes after the inspector leaves, several of the traffickers' men appear in the area, prepare their weapons, and fire a rocket launcher at the roof. Breaking through the rain of bullets, both manage to reach the basement, where they escape through a secret exit before the criminals destroy the house with guided missiles. Later, they head to the police station to give their statements. Tarconi informs him that his house was demolished by a group of heavily armed criminals. They brought down all the foundations with guided rocket launchers. They found more than 500 shells around the area. Frank tells him that they didn't know. When he left the house after informing him of what happened with his vehicle, they decided to go out for a walk on the beach. They were swimming for a couple of hours. They went to a secluded place to avoid running into other people. Doubting his story, the inspector asks if he has any enemy with great influence, to which Frank replies that he doesn't know. In his military past, he had many problems, but it is something he prefers to leave in the past. At that moment, one of the agents informs Tarconi that they are looking for him. He leaves them alone, and Lai decides to use the computer to search the database, looking for the owners of the same vehicle model as the Mercedes. She manages to find information about the trafficker. They print the data and wait for the inspector to return. When they leave the station, Lai tries to convince him to take revenge, but Frank replies that he will not retaliate. He will buy a new house and start a new life under another identity. The trafficker thinks they are dead. It is best to start from scratch. At that moment, Lai reveals that she knows the mobster. He is a trafficker who keeps 400 people inside a container on a ship. Among them are her father and sisters. The ship will arrive in a few hours, and they will turn her family into slaves. Wall is the only one who knows the number of the container. Martin points out that for that reason, he decided to stay at his house. The moment he saw his war memories, he planned to involve him to have his support. Despite this, Lai manages to convince him with a couple of words. As they go in search of the trafficker, the inspector notices the last search on his computer. In the next scene, we see the mobster being surprised by the couple. Frank points his weapon at him and orders him to put his hands in sight. While Lai looks through his documents, Wall tells him that he knew the package had been opened. For that reason, he tried to kill him with the bomb. It is very likely that Lai told him he is a human trafficker, but he must know she is a liar. Her father will be furious when he finds out about her inventions. Frank tells him that he thought her father was a victim, to which Lai gets nervous and points a gun at him, telling him that she deceived him for a good cause. At that moment, a man escorted by 2 bodyguards appears in the office. It turns out to be Lai's father. Kwai is the leader of the human trafficking organization. After an intense family argument, Kwai prepares to kill the transporter with his weapon. Lai asks him to stop. Luckily, the inspector appears at the right moment, taking advantage of the situation. Frank tries to defend himself, but in the end ends up being knocked out. When the inspector enters the room because of the noises, Wall tells him that Martin kidnapped his partner's daughter to extort them. He would like to press charges for kidnapping. Tarconi tells him they will take care of everything, asks his men to take him away, and gets ready to leave, mentioning that he will be waiting in his office to take their statements. Knowing that something is wrong with the supposed businessman, the inspector asks him to tell the truth. It is clear that pensions are not his only source of income. As a result of recent events, he is shown that he is involved in something delicate. Frank tells him that the supposed businessmen are actually human traffickers. There are 400 people locked in a container who are about to be enslaved. He reveals that Lai is not a cook. She is the daughter of the leader of the organization. It was she who asked him for help to save the immigrants. The inspector tells him that he has always respected him. He knows his military life and knows that he is prepared to face any scenario. If he wanted, he could escape from the station right now, but he knows he has values. For that reason, he will ask for his help to stop the traffickers. Upon reaching an agreement, the inspector pretends to be a hostage so that Frank can leave the station without anyone intervening. When they arrive at the port, Martin heads to one of the boats where he has several weapons hidden. Sailing for several hours at sea, our protagonist manages to reach the location of the containers, advances strategically, and spots the traffickers in the distance. At that moment, Martin is forced to reveal his position when he runs into one of the thugs. Upon hearing the shot, the traffickers try to speed up the operation, but the ex-soldier takes them by surprise by jumping onto one of the trucks. To try to knock it down, the driver approaches the fences, forcing him to jump onto a bus. When he reaches the terminal, the thugs confront him and try to knock him out among several. Using his skills acquired in the war, Frank manages to knock out more than 20 men without even being hit, until he faces a giant experienced in combat, who manages to land several heavy blows, but not enough to knock him out. Suddenly, several mobsters join the fight. To make them slip, Martin spills several containers of oil, makes a move and manages to free himself from the giant, then overturns a container onto himself, which allows him to prevent the criminals from holding him again. With bicycle pedals adapted to his shoes, our protagonist begins to take down the thugs one by one, taking advantage of his terrain advantage on the oil-covered ground, where his enemies constantly lose balance. After escaping by sea, he sets off towards the traffickers, but his vehicle breaks down in the middle of the road. By chance, a farmer passes near the area with his airplane. He keeps following him, cutting the way, and when he stops, he points his gun at him, forcing him to take him to the road until he finds the traffickers. Totally determined, Martin jumps with a parachute, landing on one of the containers, takes down the driver, and takes control of the truck. The thug starts shooting at him, and the trafficker jumps onto the vehicle to try to surprise him. Martin manages to see him in time and attacks him with the rearview mirror glass. They start a fight, and Wall manages to throw him out of the truck, but his opponent clings to life by grabbing onto the bottom. The mob leader notices and tries to shoot him, but his daughter grabs his arm, causing the shots to go astray, something the transporter takes advantage of, neutralizing the driver with a key that was conveniently within reach. Returning to the cabin with a risky jump, our protagonist finally manages to eliminate the trafficker, takes back the wheel, and parks in a coastal area to catch his breath. But just at that moment, the leader of the organization reappears, pointing his revolver at his head. He orders him to get out and lace his fingers behind his head, then tells him to walk until he reaches a cliff. He messed with the wrong people, and now he will suffer the consequences, not before telling him his twisted plan. He will deliver the immigrants, and his daughter will end up forgetting him forever. Frank tells him that his daughter is different. He will never be able to convince her to follow his same path. Just when the mobster was about to kill him, Lai intervenes, neutralizing her father with a shot to the back. Seeing her crying, Frank decides to approach her to comfort her. A few minutes later, the inspector appears and congratulates him for having ended the criminals. They check the containers and free the captives once and for all.